Welcome to Talking Data Equity for Friday, July 18th, 2025. My name is Heather Kraus, and I'm a mathematical statistician that really wants to produce data projects that are aligned with the equity goals and the context of the projects. And it was that really strong desire that motivated me to found this organization, We All Count. And We All Count is an organization that builds tools and provides courses and trainings and online workshops about really concrete, practical ways that you can make sure that you're not harming the people that you're trying to support or understand with your data projects. And frankly, my favorite part of We All Count is this activity that you have made your way to today. Most Fridays, We All Count offers a free drop-in session called Talking Data Equity that is open to anybody in any sector, in any part of the world, any level of kind of data or technical proficiency, who wants to learn more about the actual practical, concrete ways to align your data projects with your values, with your contexts, with your communities. And every Friday is a little bit different. Sometimes we talk about a really technical topic, like how to write our code for Bayesian analysis to allow community voice into your causal analysis. Or sometimes we talk about something like how to deal with the fact that the US Census is changing the way it collects race. And sometimes we have special guests, and we have special guests today. And I'm just about to introduce you to our special guests. But before I do that, I want to just spend about 30 seconds letting you know what the housekeeping is so you can relax and feel at home and feel welcomed and comfortable. And so you can see that this is being held as a Zoom meeting and that there's a few hundred people here. And we've been doing this for about 4 years. And so far, we've had no trolls and no disasters. So we'd like to keep it that way. And one of the ways we keep it that way is that we use the very same Zoom link every Friday. So if you've made your way here today, you're going to be able to make your way here any other Friday. And we do record this. So we record this and we share it in our data equity community forum. I've just put a Zoom link in, I mean, not a Zoom link, a link to the forum in the chat. That's a public good. You don't have to like belong, and that you don't have to pay money to belong to that or anything. So you can always go there to look at the recording, or I'm sure after today, you're going to want to send your colleagues to the recording because today is awesome. And in addition to that, we're going to ask, because there are a few hundred people here, that you keep your microphone turned off while our special guests are sharing their initial stories and their slides. Feel free to use the Zoom chat and have a conversation. Use that space for your questions and what you resonate with and your experiences. But we're going to ask that the first part you keep your microphone turned off, and then we'll make sure that we have time for you to turn your microphones on and ask questions and share responses. We really do mean for this to be a fireside chat. Okay, so enough from me. I am now going to turn it over to our very special guests, Dr. Nicole Bowman and Larry Bremner. Thank you so much, Dr. Bowman and Mr. Bremner, for making time to join us today. And I'm going to turn it over to you initially, and then I'll join back in a moment.
Kolomosi, Brother Elder Bremner, do you want to say a word and then I can add a prayer?
Sure. I just want to thank everybody for your interest, and I really look forward to learning from you. So thank you for being here.
I'm going to say a quick prayer for us to be very intentional. In the chat, I wrote what the word direction mean, the word wundakwa, In my Lenape language, I'm Delaware and Mohican. Delaware, we say Lenape. This is the Muncie dialect. I wrote the phonetic spelling Wundakwa because when I pray to the 7 directions, if you want to say Wundakwa to yourself or aloud with your mute on because we want to follow what Heather says, or I don't know if we can unmute. I just want to bring us together in a good way in this space. And for some of you who are going through things, just know that we've been preparing and thinking about and putting this together for a long time. And we're so thankful that you're here. We're very intentional about the way that we do our work and we come together. So the smudge is rolling and pretty soon so will the slides. Anishi kishalamokwe elamiliang yong kwai kishqueak walk michwakan walam lissawakan walk nialagomati walk niwikian walk Wundakwa. Wundakwa. In the eastward direction, we thank you. That's the place where we learn our culture, language, and we rise. We rise up to meet the day and we thank the Creator, Kishalamokwe, for another day. In the southern direction, Wundakwa, we say Anishik. And in the western direction, Wundakwa, we say Anishik. Anishik means thank you. In the northern direction, this is a place where the elders are sitting with us. It's the color white. We say Anishik, Kishalamokwe, Wundakwa for that direction. In the earthward direction, Kukana Aki, our earth, our mother earth, we say Aking Wundakwa. Thank you for that earthward direction, Kishalamokwe. In the skyward direction where we all start, come from and where we return to, Apama Ka Mikak Wundakwa. In that skyward direction, we say thank you. And then we hope from this session today, Nibu Bausa Wakanam, for all these things in our life and what we're bringing here, in our spirits and in our minds and in our bodies, that inward direction, Alami Wundakwa, that inward direction, we ask you to bring that with you as well. And just a special Anishi, thank you to Larry and my little brother, my big brother Larry, my little brother Ben, who are on today. And also she is holding the house. Deya Gano Awagu. I hope I'm saying that right for Eden. I'm speaking Oneida. She is holding the house. She's not here today. Her sister got married yesterday, so she sends her greetings as well. So thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Nikki. Okay, I'm going to take a moment to acknowledge the fact that the place where I am holding this meeting from is on the traditional territories of many nations. And that includes the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat. And the lands where we're hosting this meeting are currently now the home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. And that the dispossession, the removal, and the state-sanctioned actions of genocide against these people and other Indigenous people are not confined to the past. Economic marginalization, data extraction, and the looming extinction of many native languages is still happening right now. And so part of our commitment to truth and reconciliation is to try and tell the truth about this. And part of our actions towards reconciliation include asking ourselves every time whether what I'm doing today is positively impacting the social, economic, or political standings of Native communities. And as a business, We All Count engages in economic reconciliation by paying 5% of our profits to data projects that are owned and operated by Indigenous women. And this quarter, that payment is to Native Biodata Consortium, which is led by Dr. Crystal Sosi, Diné Navajo Nation, that some of you here know. So this is our commitment to truth and reconciliation, and we hope that you'll take a minute to ask yourselves this question about what the truth is and what your actions towards reconciliation are. And then we'll turn it back to Dr. Bowman and Mr. Bremner. Thank you so much for making time in your schedule to share with us today.
I'm happy, very happy to be here. As you can see on the slide, I'm Larry Bremner. I'm Métis. Métis, one of the three Indigenous peoples recognized by the Canadian government. You can see some of the things I've done. My great-grandfather, his name was Mohican Bremner, and his father, which would be my great-great-grandfather, were 2 of 30 Métis that signed a petition that they sent to the federal government protesting the giving of their land to the Prince Albert Colonization Company. The petition was ignored. They ended up fighting as part of the resistance of Batoche against the Canadian Army. It didn't go the way they were hoping, so they moved to the United States and came back and homesteaded in Dormy, Saskatchewan in 1905. That's a little bit about my background. I started Proactive in 1984, and the focus of Proactive has been giving voice to people, individuals that don't usually have voice in evaluation. That includes children, youth, marginalized populations, and Indigenous communities. I had the great fortune of working in Indigenous communities across the Yukon, Northwest Territories, Nunavut, and Southern Canada, as well as East Central Europe, Mongolia. So I've met some wonderful people who are dedicated their lives to making things better for their community. So that's just a little bit about me.
Kolamosi ni Deshinzi Wachiwa New Kanewokni known GIE, Shana, Wisconsin. I ask that y'all, I'm a blue collar scholar, so please call me Nikki. And I'm happy to be a friend and a daughter and a wife, a sister and an auntie. A vigilante is what I'm told, and a mom, a dog mom. And so happy that you all are here. I work for BPC. I also work at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And there's a bunch of other work-related stuff that I do down there, but I'm just community member here. And Heather, thank you so much for having us. You know, I've been a fan of this and you for a long time. This is an important venue, and thanks to everyone for taking your time to be here today with us. I'll just give a quick overview. This is based on a paper that Larry and I have put together, and I think we can probably link that in the chat. It's an open access paper through the Canadian Journal of Program Evaluation, but Indigenous data sovereignty has been a global movement. I guess it officially started in 2015 when a formal international network was created, and there is an Indigenous Data Sovereignty Network. And there was a meeting down in, I want to say in Australia or New Zealand, that initially came together, and a lot of the folks were Indigenous researchers, right? And people who carried out programs and designed programs and carried them out. The work of this is tied to not only rights of nature, tribal constitutional rights for folks who have constitutions, and Indigenous ways of knowing, being, and doing from a traditional standpoint, but also to the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People. And so Larry and I in 2014 went to the Indigenous Data Sovereignty Conference, and that's what we originally were supposed to be writing about. And he goes, let's just write about that. And I'm like, no, like the field of evaluation needs to be part of this, because part of the way that settler practices sneak in is to say, oh, we're doing an evaluation so we don't have to go through IRB or whatever. And sort of the stance that Larry and I have always taken is, what does the community want? I mean, we're community people. You know, because some tribes or First Nations, Indigenous communities, urban Indian centers, some of them don't have policies around data protection, the intellectual property, which is like what the things that we learn and do in ceremony and in community, academia calls intellectual property, right? And if you are a traditional person, we know that we are caregivers of information, caretakers, caregivers, if we are given responsibilities to pass that along. And so as caretakers of the community, this concept of property and protection and governance is really, an area that needs more discussion and development, and in particular in the field of evaluation. So Larry and I ended up having this cool experience together, and then thank goodness that between Larry and Linda, hi Linda, we got to author a paper together. And I think they're having another conference it's every other year now in April of 2026. So I have my people checking weekly to find out when that is, because I'm definitely going again. And so that's sort of what the overview is. And we hope from this, there are some key terms. Indigenous data sovereignty refers to the right of Indigenous peoples to exercise ownership over their data. It can be expressed in many ways, whether it's creation, collecting, sharing, analysis, how we interpret it, how we manage it, how we disseminate it, how we reuse it. If I work in an Indigenous community, I don't have, just because I'm Indigenous does not give me the right. I always found everything I do on being a good relative and doing good medicine. And that's what Lara and I function. That's how we move through life. And so that means whether the project is on, whether it's 10 years later or whatever, we always stay in good relationship with those that trusted us to be part of their community. The Indigenous data governance refers to the right of Indigenous peoples to autonomously decide what, how, and why Indigenous data are collected, assessed, and used. It ensures that data on or about Indigenous peoples reflects the priorities, values, cultures, ethics, worldviews, and the great diversity. And Larry's going to talk a little bit about some of that diversity and put a Canadian vibe to this.
You can see there are more than 500 million Indigenous people in 90 countries around the world, make up about 6% of the global population. There are 5,000 plus groups speaking over 7,000 different languages. I guess one of the things that we hear sometimes through the press or through political systems is, what do those First Nations people want? Or what do those American Indians want? And you go, guess what? There's not a want. They have different political realities, different historic realities. They have different languages. They have different contexts. We have to remember that while there are commonalities in terms of relationality between the human world and the natural world and our non-human relatives, there are quite diverse communities, and we need to keep that in mind when we do a research evaluation, as well as appropriate protocols for the use of data and the kind of data. So I guess next slide. There's been a recognition and rights. UNDRIP was passed by the United Nations in 2007. 4 countries would not sign on to it: Australia, New Zealand, United States, and Canada. Canada finally signed on in 2015. UNDRIP talks about Indigenous sovereignty, legal recognition of Indigenous nations as self-governing entities. You can see in the United States there's 574 recognized tribal nations, more than 630 in Canada, with 50 different distinct nations and language groups. Indigenous self-government was recognized in Canada's Constitution Act of 1982. Right now, for those of you who are not in Canada, we're having an interesting discussion because Parliament passed Bill C5, which is going to fast track fast track projects across Canada, and it forgoes the duty to consult and it forgoes the need to consult with Indigenous communities. So once again, while we've got UNDRIP and while Canada signed on and declared that there's going to be a new relationship between First Nations and the Canadian government on a nation-to-nation basis, we're still seeing sort of paternalistic kinds of moves from a government that doesn't understand the need to consult, to respect, and to give back in a respectful way to First Nations communities and to the larger Canadian community. Nick's going to talk about the global movement.
Thank you. I mentioned it a little bit earlier, but you can see that it started in 2015 by the Global Indigenous Data Alliance. It's interesting if you look back at UNDRIP to see who signed on first and when the United States and Canada and some of these other countries signed on, it was much later. So I think that that's very interesting from a power and governance standpoint, as well as I think it's also beautiful and strong, this Global Indigenous Data Alliance, that we are people who do not see boundaries. We are just connected. We are connected much more deeply by our self-governance, our nation building, our beautiful relationship to trees and nature and the water, and things that are our living relatives but may not be human. You'll see a balance. And I think this is really important to bring out for the researchers, evaluators, policymakers, funders, and practitioners who are here. Our indigeneity, and please forgive me, I do mean also First Nation, Inuit, Métis, because I realize there's a Canadian context around this too, because of where we all count comes from. I use the word Indigenous to talk about the ways that we share spiritually, mentally, emotionally, intellectually, or practically. It is important for those of you who are here to receive this and to carry the message out. Our indigeneity isn't just about our traditions, although those oral histories, language, knowledge, and lived experience, that is the roots. Those are the roots to our foundation. We also have our inherent rights, and you can look at it through constitutions. You can look at it through UNDRIP, but there is a legal. So for those nerds in the room, there's a legal theory, legal lens, political lens, governance lens around this. So we're trying to hold both, and not just say, hey, great, you can smudge, but to hell with your rights. Okay. That's sort of what we're trying to bring forward. Larry will do it in a much more gentlemanly way. I'm a little more like the rough carpenter in the group. Okay. Just say that. I think we can go to the next slide. I want to leave time at the end. Ben or anyone, we try to make these, I think we have the slides for you as well. We shared. Thank you. We made this, we were just saying we made this a long time ago because you never know what life's going to throw at you. Plus, we don't like to have rush energy, just like you don't cook when you're mad or rushed. For traditional people or folks who just have that as a value, we do the same thing with our PowerPoints and our presentations and our publications. So the Indigenous Fair and Care principles are part of the work. These are some of the earliest folks that have been working on what the care and fair principles are in this. Stephanie Carroll Russell and a lot of her comrades worked on this. And I think the care and fair principles are also contextualized. So how it's expressed within each, if it's Australia, New Zealand, United States, or Canada is one thing. And then within those geographic spaces, how each community or organization or individual Indigenous scholar, practitioner, researcher, evaluator, right, might carry it out. We are bound by these guidelines. We're not bound, but we have guidelines, but we get to have this expression the way that we would like to have it in the spaces that we are doing this work. Next slide. When we talk about decolonizing evaluation and Indigenous data sovereignty, Larry and I do a lot of stuff we fight with a lot of people. Larry, is fight a good word? I'm not really sure. But we advocate. Is that a better word?
That's it.
Whether it's in the way that we do our roots and relations permanent section inside of the Canadian Journal of Program Evaluation, or whether it's writing, can you contribute this to this book chapter, the journal article, whatever, we say, what does the agreement look like? Who gets it? Is it open access? How does this work? You know, and we sometimes we spend years negotiating that and updating it as things change. And sometimes we say no and we walk away because it's not a value we have. And it's not like Larry and I are big corporate, we're not big corporations. We're not, you know, we don't have places that we owned or worked for that had 5,000 people. We're just little Nikki Bowman and little Larry Bremner bumming around life together. And I sort of like it because we may get a little dusty once in a while, but we are always popping up and there we are. And I think that's the power of the ancestors that's with us as we do some of this. So go ahead,
I
Larry.
just want to mention one thing. If you look at the 5th point there, Indigenous state of sovereignty extends to land, water, and ecosystems.
Yes.
I wanted to mention that for people who may not be familiar with this, the Southern Chiefs Organization in Manitoba has taken a legal charter challenge to have Lake Winnipeg recognized as a living entity with the same rights and protections as a person, including the right to life, liberty, and security of the person. The Magpie River in Quebec was granted legal personhood in 2021, which includes the rights to exist, maintain its natural cycles and biodiversity, and be free from pollution. You've got in October 2024, the British Columbia Assembly of First Nations passed a resolution calling on the province and others to work with First Nations to advance the legal personhood of nature, including water bodies such as rivers and lakes, forests and mountains within First Nations unceded traditional territory. So Indigenous data sovereignty isn't just about people. From an Indigenous perspective, it's about nature, it's about the relationship between the human and non-human and our non-human relatives. So you have to, I've been talking about this in terms of evaluation to evaluators because it really has to change the lens we've been using and the frame we've been using when we do our work. And I think it's important to keep some of these concepts that may be new to us in mind when we start looking about Indigenous data sovereignty and how can we frame it in ways that are for community. Anyway, I just wanted.
No, appreciate it. To Larry's point, rights of nature is something that we hear our friend Andrea Lisa Belzer talk about. We also hear, I would like to shout out the Canadian Evaluation Society for having bystander ethics, so that the weight of talking about these, you know, Indigenous data sovereignty and the implications of them, whether it's in policy or legal frameworks, designing things, when you're actually sitting in the middle of meetings, sessions, contract negotiations, whatever it might be, to uphold this. Bystander ethics means that if you see something, you say something, and it holds a lot more weight, unfortunately, but sometimes as non-Indigenous folks, because you know we're not the ones mostly in charge. We're the smallest percent of the population, and we have to deal with a lot of the things that are systematized. Is that the right way to say it? And ensconced in creating and upholding these extractive, if we don't want to use the word settler or colonial, these machine-based paradigms, these extractive, life-taking systems, instead of being life-giving, life-affirming for human and non-human relatives. And so we are working to reclaim our space here. And to, you know, if you think about things real practically, why these policy and legal frameworks are important, if what is being used for the last 526 years here in the United States was working, then we wouldn't still continue to have the chronic health education. Um, you can fill in the blank on our data. Basically, we're the smallest part of the population, but we're overrepresented in terms of graduation rates, death, disease, all these things. So our hearts want to do something differently, and I would ask that within your hearts, we also start using additional strategies through policy, governance, advocacy efforts to actually sort of balance this out and make that happen. And in terms of Indigenous data sovereignty, I know that is happening much more. Even the language is even more frequently heard, even if the policy or practice might not be there. So some of the work that you all do might be things that First Nations and Indigenous people will ask for your help with. We did a missing murdered Indigenous women study for the state of Wisconsin, and before I would sign my contract with the prime contractor, who was a white contractor, but a trusted ally, I said, any data that the tribes are going to give to my company, you're not getting and the state's not getting. I'll give you an aggregate, but don't ask, because it's not happening. You'll have to come take it out of my hands in my office. So, and I said it a little nicer than that, but the allies I work with, they know what they get when they hire me, and they know I can behave too. And so from that, word got out with the 12 tribes, 11 recognized and federally recognized, the 12 tribes who were part of the study, and had a working relationship with the state, right? Not because of the study, but there's a formal task force, and said, we want the same rules that Bowman has with the prime, and that the prime is making with the state. And so I just really want you to know that when you put your heart and the elbow grease to do this through policy contractual frameworks, it really can have implications that you don't even realize, that you didn't intentionally do. I found out years after we're into the study that's how this got set up. So that was pretty cool. Anyways, moving on. Say now we're at 35 here. Just a word that part of our action and part of our work that we're doing here today is to bring in awareness. That's why Larry and I wrote the paper. That's why at the end of the paper, there are concrete calls to action. We could update it already, and it's not even been a year since we wrote it. Because things are always changing, which kind of gets us into the next slide. Artificial intelligence is all the big rage, but I won't go into. I would just ask that you start reading about the origin story of artificial intelligence, what it was supposed to be, and where it is going, where it is now and where it's going. I have a pile of books back here. I don't know if you can see, these are all AI books that I have to read by fall, or at least get a good eyeball on the main points. I've started a few of them, but this is erasure at warp speed. We were at a conference where AI and culturally responsive evaluation this spring was a session, and we basically, it was an extractive exercise, and and there were lots of people of color in there, not just Indigenous people, and they shared some things about what AI represents, and if you don't publish, or it's not on the internet, it's not going to get in there, so you're going to get erased. The way AI thinks about things and the nuances and the way we live and do things are very different. They showed a lot of the errors of AI. So I would ask us, this AI has me this is going to be the next area that I'm writing about, because I'm very, very concerned about it and what it's going to be doing to the thinking and the human and the interaction going on.
It really has the capability of being just another threatening extractive process for Indigenous knowledge and processes. So we have to, I think, really, it's like anything else. if AI is going to be a meaningful tool for Indigenous people have to be involved in all aspects of the development, the accumulation of knowledge, they have to be meaningfully involved in all the processes, or else it becomes just another example of a tool that extracts for the benefit of others, right?
And when I guess an action that you all can do is when you read articles or when you go to conferences and you're hearing about AI, and if you're only seeing privileged in all forms, privileged folks talk about AI, you should be a critical consumer and ask why the people who are being most harmed by AI are not part of that discussion and a resource part of that discussion. A good book I will also share is Karen Hao, H-A-O. She has a 2025 book called The Empire of AI. And she's an AI expert and investigative journalist, and she began covering it. But she thought it started out as something great, and as she did more and more digging, she's understanding that it's very disruptive, and it's backed by billions and billions of dollars from Microsoft and other organizations that it's extractive data. Larry and I have a picture in one of our presentations. I don't know if it's in this last article we did, but it's like we feel like we're mined sometimes. So like it's like how the earth is mined and there's holes in it, like it's the same thing. It's like informational mining. And it's not accurate and it erases. And and this isn't just for our community, it's for everyone, like how can AI or technology understand what your lived experience is, let alone within your family, community, or the lineage of your kinship? That's for everyone. Larry, move us forward, please, so we got some time to visit with the good people. Next slide.
Yeah, next slide. So basically, we have responsibilities as evaluators, researchers, mathematicians, academics. We need to ensure that IDS is ethical, sustainable research practices, equitable decision-making, I mentioned already, in terms of promoting fairness, accountability, and Indigenous sovereignty. I think all our work foundation is promotion and support of Indigenous sovereignty. And partnerships with non-Indigenous allies must be intentional and respect Indigenous leadership, AI, other threats. I came across something, I guess a week or so ago. It's called the Data Governance and Management Tool for Self-Governing Indigenous Governments. And so we're starting to see Indigenous nations putting together tools, guidelines, policies. And what struck me is the calls to action for the Truth and Reconciliation Commission came out in 2015, and I went through the calls to action, and it really reinforced to me how new the whole focus on Indigenous data sovereignty is, because Indigenous data sovereignty wasn't mentioned once in the 94 calls to action. We talked about monitoring, they talked about education, we talked about social services, and I think if that report were written today, Indigenous data sovereignty would definitely be a heading of some of those calls to action. Next slide, Ben. So I think we have responsibilities I mentioned earlier. I think everybody should be familiar with OCAP. There's, Nikki mentioned before, Truth and Reconciliation e-courses through CES. You can go to the Indigenous Data Sovereignty courses through the First Nations Information Governance Center. our responsibility, Nikki mentioned, is aligning publication practices with our principles in terms of intellectual property, protecting the intellectual property of Indigenous authors, and highlight, if you can, at conferences, the importance and the work that you're doing to support Indigenous data sovereignty. Next slide, Ben. Okay. We said a lot, but we try to speak quickly.
You said a lot in value and we really again, before I open it up for questions, want to thank you so much for of course coming live with us today to share your wisdom, but also to really back to Nikki, your point at the beginning, how much work and mindfulness and intention and care you put into getting here. And I know that everybody here has access to this paper. And if you haven't already read it, or if you've only read it once, I highly recommend going back and reading it again, because there are some very, very powerful examples of noticing how to embed Indigenous data sovereignty in kind of the nitty-gritty rituals of evaluation that we all take for granted. And so I really recommend that, and huge gratitude to Larry, Ben, and Nikki. And so this will be your opportunity now to turn your microphone on and share a reflection, share a response, ask a question. And there are, again, a couple hundred people here. So if possible, we're going to ask that you, if you want to turn your microphone on, that you do the little Zoom raise your hand thing. Now, I know Zoom updates itself a lot and the raise your hand changes. So right now it's under the reaction button, which is the little heart. But if you want to raise your hand and you can't find that reaction button, just put it into the chat and we'll turn your microphone on. Or if you don't feel like asking through your microphone, you can ask in the chat and I'm happy to amplify those questions. And I think while you all decide if you want to raise your hand and turn your microphone on, I'm going to amplify the most asked question in the chat right now. A lot of these are direct messages to me, but I think it is a very pressing situation, which is if you're an evaluator and you come into the project at the point where the data has already been collected, and it does include data that's been collected from people who are Indigenous, First Nations, Inuit, Métis. What would be your order of operations? Would you just recommend that the way to be an ally is to walk away? Or is there a way to kind of cure upstream a harm that's been done?
I'll just jump in, Nick, and then you can correct me. I've always argued that one of the responsibilities of evaluators is to educate the client. And so I think by opting out, you would be missing an opportunity to actually work with the client and show them, educate them about what it might have looked like to be more meaningful to those communities, to the people in the communities. So I think it would be basically presenting an opportunity to educate somebody who doesn't really understand the importance of what they are doing. Nick, thought?
I would say the way that the older I get, the more crafty I have to be because I don't have as much piss and vinegar. But I still got some. As Toby Keith says, I'm as good once as I ever was, so watch out. Oh, I got a laugh on that one. Good. I want to be funny too, not just smart and cute. Just teasing. Anywho, the way that I have sort of refined my approach is I talk to organizations about capacity and readiness. It's how do we make it not about us so we have to carry the burden? It's on them. As a recovering over caretaker, it is not the responsibility is not mine to carry the guilt, the shame, the education, the explanation. We all should be participating in that. And may I say again, and this should be resourced. There's a lot of mental and emotional labor besides the intellectualness of it all and having to tell how many thousands of people the same time for decades of our life, the same stuff. So if you read my earlier publications, a lot of it is go read the first 4 things I published and get back to me so we can have a conversation. Like, go on, I only have a limited amount of life, and quality of life. So I talked to it about capacity and readiness, quite frankly, and ask them what they have done and what resources are there, or how do we build in. Sometimes I have a capacity and readiness or emergent technical assistance to help folks out, because I try to meet them gently, more gently, where they're at, by saying, we understand the stuff that you have or have not learned about us that needs to be unlearned and relearned, isn't in the K-12 books that you had, the undergraduate or graduate, in the professional development sessions, unless you're going to We Are Count. Yes, I weave that in there on purpose. Thank you very much. And so helping them to see that this is their collective load to carry, and we can guide them in the right direction. But that's something that in terms of program, you can say at the individual, project, program, organizational, or system level of capacity and readiness is sort of the language that I use, and say, what have you done for me lately, to use Janet Jackson, or like, do you know all of the tribes? Do you know all of the treaties and like ask them some big high questions that folks should know, and you can tell within the first 5 minutes like where they're at. And I would like to say one more thing to the folks who are asking about how AI creates erasure, and I'm going to hand it back to Larry then. In the same vein that I said, it's not in our K-12 books, it's not in our formal education systems. If you're in the health system, the doctors and nurses don't get trained that way. The policies don't reflect this. The activities don't reflect this. All I want to say is this has been happening since time immemorial, since the Nina, Pinta, and Santa MF and Maria got here to Turtle Island. It's been erasure. It's just using technology to erase, right? We're hardly in the books. We're hardly in the publications. We're not represented in places. So I just want people to really think about origin stories. Okay, this is just the technology tool. This is the George Jetson of things, instead of writing on stones or in the ground or on birch bark or whatever those paper scrolls were that, the Christians and the colonizers, would write up when they would come study us or take our lives or our natural resources, right? It's the same type of erasure. We don't want somebody else's voices telling the story, right? And AI is just doing it at warp speed. So I want you to please not act surprised, because if any of you know a thimbleful about history, you know that somebody else has been always spinning and telling somebody else's story, whether it was ours or immigrant stories or our poor African Americans, brothers and sisters who came over on slave ships, all of that. And I'm not real worldly. I'm a little rough around the edges here. So I'm just saying, like, this erasure has been going on since time immemorial, since somebody wanted something that somebody else had, including our Earth Mother.
And I'll just add to what Nikki has just said. And she mentioned the importance of origin stories. I think it's also important not only for us to know our origin stories to better understand the lens through which we view the world or view programs or view projects, but I think it's important for people working in organizations to understand the origin story of that organization. And I'll use an example in Canada here of Indigenous Services Canada, which used to be INAC, which used to be that government department's origin story was to take the Indian out of the Indian, to do those kinds of things to Indigenous people in this country. And while the people are different and believe they're doing good for Indigenous communities, that giant ship called Indigenous Services Canada is slowly still moving in the same direction, pursuing a lot of the similar goals. So I think from an Indigenous data sovereignty perspective, um, we have to understand if we're working in an organization, an Indigenous organization, there are a number of things we have to keep in mind in terms, but one of them, and we haven't mentioned this, is if your data is in the cloud, where is the cloud? If it's in the United States, all your data is open. If the government comes in and says under the USA Patriots Act, they can access that data. So when I used to be president of the Canadian Evaluation Society, I found out that all our membership data was on the cloud in the United States. We had to change clouds because we want to make sure that foreign governments don't have access to our data. So one of the things from an Indigenous data sovereignty perspective, I think you should keep in mind is who is managing the cloud and where is it situated, because that has real access issues to your data. Anyway, I'm sorry, it went on a little too long.
No, not at all. We don't feel that way. Um, and this is what I mean by really, really getting into the nitty gritty of the reality of Indigenous data sovereignty. That example of the cloud and where it's being stored is such a good illustration of the fact that this isn't only a really important idea. These are really important nitty gritty choices in your everyday life. And there's never anybody who can't do anything about it. There's always a choice on your plate, whatever your role is, that you can move towards Indigenous sovereignty. Nicole, thank you for waiting. Go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning. Can y'all hear and see me okay?
Yes, we can.
Thank you, Ms. Krause, for this opportunity. Thank you, Sister Nikki and Brother Larry. My name is Nicole. I'm out here in the Umatilla County area in Oregon, and I work for the Oregon Health Authority. It's the healthcare arm of the state, and we're looking to collect data, right, in order to tell a story of how racism is impacting health outcomes in our state. But what we're finding is that if we don't collect very specific data that's required by our state law, then we can't tell the story of how racism is impacting people. So we're a little bit torn right now in how we design what data we are looking to collect with our partners. But I just want to say this has been really insightful already, and we will have many more conversations with our partners, but just wanted to see if there was any insight about how can we collect data that can be helpful in trying to combat historical racism or racism that's happening now, especially with a political climate where folks don't want to just be seen in a community that's vulnerable in a vulnerable way. Thank you.
So quickly, I'll say something about, we're working on a couple of projects right now where we're coaching, and it has to do with cultural safety and health, access to healthcare, access to primary care. And um, the way, and we've worked on projects in the past on this as well, and in the way to get information on authentic information on racism, on how people have been basically mistreated in the healthcare system because of biases, prejudice, is involving those people in the development of the instruments or in the development of the questions because they're better. They're a lot better knowing if they're culturally safe than I am knowing if they're culturally safe. And what that looks like in this community might look completely different in a community a couple of miles away, right? So I and for me, stories are the most powerful way to tell those stories is by storytelling. And you can use numbers to back it up for people that love the number piece. But it's I think and I think it's meaningfully involving people in the development of what you're doing. And again, that goes back to educating your funder, because you can be doing things what they need to be done, but also you can be doing these other pieces and show them how important and more important this piece is than that piece over there, and they support each other, right? Nick?
I'm listening to you and enjoying all of the comments. There's so many resources. I don't know, Heather, if you can save the comments and send it to folks, that would be great. Clearly, we've touched on something here. I'm super excited about the energy and that you're all reaching out to each other. I wanted to make one little comment. I can't comment about the comments. People are asking about this is a great question. Who is housing? What nation state has the safest place to house data? As an Indigenous person, I'd say none, but I know that's probably ignorant and it may not be fair or accurate. I can tell you that if you if you tap into the Indigenous Data Sovereignty Network, that might be a good place to start. I personally work with a group called the Native Biodata Consortium, and they are building servers and codes and all this stuff with tribal nations. And I think they work outside of the United States, and they have they have funders and they have partners that are working on these things, but they're actually they're building, I guess they will call them, they have a special name for them, but they're the servers. They're the things that hold for tribes, so that when the government, the state government, the federal government, national government, whatever, international government, funders, private or organizations that make the drugs, I can't, Eli Lilly, stuff like that, any of sectors or any partners, tribes can say, this is what we want you to study. No, you will not own our data. And this is what you're going to study. And you're going to publish, you're going to do things the way we want. And you're going to publish results if we say you can publish results and that it is really working. So they're actually talking about origin stories, going back to the origin. What's the way we can govern and have our own data? This is no easy task, and it's going to be decades or more that this gets done. But I know that work is starting to be done out there, and the Native Biodata Consortium does it. I don't know if anyone has any last comments. It shouldn't be me. I just want to say thank you. This is amazing.
Well, just because a lot of people have to leave, and I don't want them to leave wondering how they could continue. Absolutely we will put all the resources from the chat, as well as the recording, into the Talking Data Equity community forum. The Native Biodata Consortium that Nikki was just talking about, that's the work of Dr. Crystal Tosi, Diné Navajo, who was just here 2 weeks ago as our special guest. So if you want to get reminded about what they're doing, just go back in that same link where we're going to put today's recording, and you can watch Dr. Tosi's talk from 2 weeks ago, because they mesh so well together. And it's so important, if you care about Indigenous data sovereignty, to actually learn some practical choices. And that's why I'm so grateful to Nikki and Larry and Ben and their team members that couldn't be here, for helping us see what this looks like in practice. I cannot express properly how grateful I feel for the work that you're doing and the time that you spent with us today. It means the world to me. Thank you so much. We are going to leave it there to respect everyone's time commitment. Please take really good care of yourselves and really good care of each other. Mutual aid is the only way. Data equity is a team sport, and you are all on the team. Thanks again to Nikki, Larry, and Ben, and we'll see this wonderful community next Friday.
Thanks.
Thank you, Heather.
Yep.
And thank
Heather-
you, everybody.
Yes, really. Heather, can we stay on for a second with you, just like for 2 minutes?
Absolutely.
Take care, everyone. Happy weekend.
Bye, everybody.
Woohoo!
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm going to stop the recording.